Buell England,
Here.
Bill John Baker,
Here.
Jack Baker,
Here.
Harley Buzzard,
Here.
Julia Coates,
Here.
Bradley Cobb,
Mahoney.
Joe Crittenden, Jody Fishinghawk, here. Meredith Fraley, here. Janelle Fulbright, Don Garvin, Chuck Hoskin Jr.,
Here.
China Glory Jordan,
Present.
Chris Stope,
Here.
Curtis Snell, David Thornton, Eric Allen Watts.
Ani.
We do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. Okay, continuing discussion on the main motion. I have 4 names that have had their hands up. First was Julia, second was Chuck, Dr. Cobb, and then Ms. Fishinghawk. Okay. Okay, Ms. Coates.
Thank you.
This is on the main motion.
Right. I want to congratulate Bill John Baker and all of the 6-year people who are holding 6-year terms on this council, and I do want to assure you that my intent in bringing this back again is not to be mean-spirited. I really do believe that there are merits to considering this. I'm sure what it looks like to our constituents may seem like that, but as we know, we often take into account many more things than appear on the surface sometimes. My concerns in bringing this back are that we get to a place of more equitable and fair government in our election practices. If we leave the law as it is right now, what we have is a situation where one half of this council gets what Mr. Hembry, I think, and I'm not saying that he endorsed this, but to use his language, gets a free shot at higher office without relinquishing, without taking any risk, whereas fully one half of this council will never have that opportunity. And to me, there's just something inherently unfair about that kind of a system. The amendment that I offered today that you have in writing before you also is addressing something that I see as unfair about the act that I brought forth. I had overlooked it because I had simply picked up what Dr. Cobb had last time, and that is allowing candidates to stay in office until the inauguration. That would make it more fair also, in my estimation. One of the arguments I've heard against this is that the Senate and many other state and federal bodies, legislative bodies, do not require anybody to resign in order to run for a different office. But I would remind everyone that the Senate is a 6-year term. I'm sure I don't need to remind everyone of that actually, but it is a 6-year term, and so sometimes it will be in the same year as the presidential elections and sometimes it won't. And even with senators who have staggered terms, that will always be the case. And so you never have a situation in that body where half of the Senate is privileged by having a free shot and half is not. Everybody at some times will have a free shot and at other times does not. So that's the difference between that situation and ours, where we have 4-year terms. Some offices will always, or some seats will always be in the same year as the principal chief, and others will not. To me, this act would reduce the opportunities for corruption. I think Councilor Soap was, trying to maybe tease out a little bit of that. It reduces the opportunities to play with the system. And I think that it's unfortunate, that we didn't think about these things before we get into an election cycle and before candidates have declared for offices. But simply because we didn't think of it in timely fashion does not mean that we should not address it. And so that's what we're doing today, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you. Mr. Hoskin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have to pick up on a comment made earlier on a point of order where we were cautioned not to talk about the principal chief. The principal chief's an elected official. He's certainly holds an important office, but I hope we haven't come to the point where we can't be critical of a sitting office holder, as long as we do so in accordance with our decorum. The People's Assembly of North Korea, I think, has a similar rule, but I don't think we ought to go down that path. we ought to have free and open debate, even that means criticizing, and the chief could certainly be here. I oppose this act. I think it was a bad idea. When it was brought up originally, we could talk all day about the timing of it being suspicious. Certainly we all could see the legal landscape a few years ago when we had staggered terms, but yet this comes up, shortly before the filing period. But I have other policy concerns about it, even if it was raised a year ago or 2 years ago. First of all, it's probably unconstitutional. There's a reason that the states that have a resign to run rule have done so by constitutional amendment, because these are important constitutional rights that are being affected by this legislation. The Equal Protection Clause generally says that the law treat all people equally, and I know people sometimes don't lose a lot of sleep over politicians and elected officials maybe having their rights infringed on, but the fact of the matter is people who serve in this body are citizens of the Cherokee Nation. They enjoy the protections of the Constitution. What this does is it makes a second class of citizen, and it says you can't run for an office unless you give up what is a very important political right that is available to all of our citizens, that is to hold an elective office on this council. This is probably unconstitutional. If we do this by statute, it will almost certainly yield a lawsuit at some point. It will almost certainly consume a great deal of resources, and I'm convinced it'll certainly be struck down. And we will have consumed a lot of resources, what I think is infringing on some important rights. I also think it's bad policy, apart from, and there's other constitutional issues with it too. Just briefly, this seems to have a retroactive effect in a sense. When we all ran for office, we knew what the law said. We knew what the law said we could do. We knew what the qualifications were to hold office. In fact, the Constitution sets forth some of those, and the statute sets forth others. And now we're going to change those after we've held office. That, to me, smacks of a retroactive law that's at least constitutionally suspect. To the policy issue, Madam Speaker, I think the reason that most states and the federal government do not impose resign to run doesn't have to do so much with protecting incumbents as it has to do with fostering a deep pool of qualified people to run for office. Any citizen of this nation is potentially qualified to be chief, but the fact of the matter is we need experienced people to run for these higher offices, and sometimes that means experience on the council. Are we going to say half of the council is ineligible to run, or they have to give up their rights to serve on the council? I hope we don't do that. I hope this isn't a compelling enough issue to strip those rights. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Dr. Cobb?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thought about this over the last 45 minutes plus, and I have decided that I am not going to have a good drive home if I don't state this. How convenient this conversation has been for us today. Isn't our sense of self-preservation such a noble cause? I think we've forgotten there's another side to this equation. Not once in the last 45 minutes has the subject of the employee's right to run without resigning their position been talked about. Not once. All we've talked about is our own self-preservation as elected officials. Why? Because we can. That's exactly why. We are the legislative branch of the Cherokee Nation. The other reason is the employees don't have a council that has a floor in this chamber. I wonder what the general constituency and some of those employees probably think about our conversation today. Not once has talked about them. All we're talking about, we put forth amendments for our own self-preservation. We should be ashamed of ourselves having this conversation today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Dr. Cobb? Ms. Fishinghawk?
I'm going to ask Todd a question because I looked up this myself, Todd, and am I not right in saying the 5 states that does have this law, did they not do it by initiative petition more or less to change the Constitution?
I don't know exactly the process they went through. I mean, it is by constitutional measure.
Okay, because I had looked that up. Chris talked about if somebody, if 2 6-year termers, if 2 6-year termers won, what would happen then? Is it not correct in saying our law says that the second place vote fills the seat?
That's what the Constitution says.
Okay. And Hartley said if we don't pass nothing, nothing will change, right? If we don't do nothing, the same.
That is correct.
And to address Councilor Cobb's question, to be honest, Councilor Cobb, I did ask my constituents, and I asked a bunch of employees over at the office, because I go down there and visit our employees at least once or twice a week, just so I can kind of see what they're doing and how they feel about things. And all my people were suspicious because of the timing of it, more or less. They said, it's already reeking of political backstabbing and biting, and they're getting tired of it. They can't believe it started out, a year and a half before the election started. But yeah, I've gone down and talked to my employees, and they said it just stuck because of the timing of the whole mess. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Ms. Cal Watts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I looked at this from a cost perspective and a scenario, like role-playing it out beyond this election, not just this election. So if asked what would happen if we didn't implement a law, I'd look at the cost, because we could anticipate special elections to fill seats. There's a constitutional amendment on the ballot that would change. I mean, if we want to defer to this candidate who got the second most votes of the people to fill that seat, as it might happen today, which I would question, I think we would have to call a special election. And when I called over to the Election Commission, they anticipated a base cost of potentially $200,000, then $750 per precinct. And so if we don't put into effect that we declare that seat open and available and proper for the citizens of the Cherokee Nation to vote on a new elected official, because that person said, we no longer want that seat, we want a different seat, then I think there's costs that we incur that I don't think we're anticipating. And whether we deal with it in this election or another election, this is a reoccurring deal. This is not about the 2011 election or one person or a group of individuals or this council. This is an ongoing issue that we need to anticipate. The other part of that is, in the 2013 election, what if the chief or deputy chief decides they want to run for a council seat? Then we have to vacate that seat, potentially, if they were to win, because then we're mixing branches, and it's not just about moving up in the world, which I don't think we're moving up, because I think we're equal branches of government, and we balance each other out, and it's just a different role. But if we were to anticipate that the chief or deputy chief got fed up with their role and decided that they needed to run in the middle of their term for one of our council seats, which would be fine, then the Cherokee people would need to anticipate that they would also have to have a huge election, which would even be more cost and more disruptive to the tribe. So I think this is beyond just council seats and who's running for what now, and this is an ongoing issue that will have cost in the form of financial impacts to the tribe, as well as disruption to our government that no one anticipated. And it's sad that we're at this part, but we need to deal with this one way or another. And I would yield any additional time to Councilman Soap, I believe, is what has been requested of me.
Yeah, I would just like to say a couple of things in regards to, Todd. The second most vote getter gets that opportunity, provided that they're still less than half the term, and provided that they haven't, a year and a half later, they haven't went off and got a job or done something else. So the likelihood of that happening is a little bit on the suspect side. So, and again, that potential falls back to the council. And if we want to talk about whether it's the employees or whoever, it's the Cherokee people is who it is. If we want to elect people, that's the best shot we have, is for them to resign prior to that close date of whenever they transition to either another position or they don't get elected. Otherwise, it's going to be the council's decision or the chief's decision, depending on how you interpret the Constitution. It's our job to make these election laws. It doesn't say in the Constitution that employees can't run. It doesn't say that and actually the Constitution, I can make a case that you could hold two positions. Speaker Fraley can jump up and fill that deputy, chief's position lickety split if the position's open for her, and we have to reserve her position here. Why couldn't you make that argument for any other person that's been elected? So that's why I say it's very important that we put definitive election law on this case and say that you have to resign at a certain date. Prior to that date that's so close that either we incur extra costs through special election, which we could do at the general election if we do it right, and save those monies, or, you know, we need to put it back into people's decision. If the people decide and that second vote getter gets to come up, that's great. But if they don't, then, you know, again, the council shouldn't have that primary role of filling that seat, in my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Henry?
Madam Chairman, I think it'd be good for the edification of the council if you would indulge me. I'll just read Section 13 of Article 6 of the Cherokee Nation Constitution, which sets out the replacement for a vacancy. Section 13.
Henry, you have a minute and a half.
Oh, I'll drop that. In the case of removal, death, resignation, or disability of any council member, such sheet shall be filled by the candidate having the next highest number of votes in that district who is available and willing to serve and whose eligibility is confirmed by the Election Commission. In the event no such candidate exists, the council shall fill the vacant seat in the following manner. If a majority of the 4-year term remains to be served, the council shall authorize a special election in the district of the vacated seat to be conducted within 90 days. If a minority of the 4-year term remains to be served, the council shall elect a replacement who would otherwise be qualified to serve from the district of the vacated seat, just for the council's edification.
Thanks, Mr. Henry. Mr. Thornton?
Call for the question, please.
We have 2 people yet that have not spoken. So, Mr. Anglin and Ms. Glory Jordan. And then the question will be called.
Mine will be real brief. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. I just want to say that I think that it's been a healthy debate all day, and I really commend this council for actually wanting to fix something early on, because nobody has filed for office yet. But we're assuming people's running and everything else. I don't know who's filed, if anybody's filed, but I know the filing period doesn't start till March, so I think this is an adequate time. I think we've had 5 months, 6 months out to fix this problem and not run it down to the wire like we did with the redistricting. So I think we're early enough out, so let's fix this problem that we know is going to happen every time there's an election. This is always going to be biting at us, and I think now's the time to put it to bed. And so I would support this legislation for that reason, because nobody has filed today.
Mr. Anglin. Ms. Glory Jordan.
Real quick, because I only have a few minutes, I see 2 problems with this. The first problem is the equal protection argument that's going to be made that we have violated the Constitution. The second part is another constitutional question that I see, that we're making something retroactive to what we already knew were our rules when we took office. The third thing that I want to point out is, in my opinion, if you really wanted to change this law, this should have been in the form of a constitutional amendment that would have been put on the ballot, and let the people that elect these counselors decide if they want them leaving office, if they decide they want to run for another office. We've loaded that ballot already with a number of constitutional amendments. You can't tell me that we could not have let the people vote on this. The last thing that I would like to point out is the law itself. I know of no other entity in this world that requires 30 days prior to the beginning of the filing period, you've got to give your irrevocable resignation. A lot of people don't even know they're going to file for something till the day before or the day of or during the filing period. This law in B3 says you've got to know a full 30 days ahead of time, and you've got to give an irrevocable resignation 30 days ahead of the beginning of the filing period. It says at least 30 days prior to the beginning of the filing period. It don't say within 30 days. It says at least 30 days. Now, folks, that's what I'm ashamed. I'm like Councilman Cobb. I'm ashamed that we're even talking about this today.
And by the way, Councilman Cobb, I did vote for the employees, if you'll recall. This whole afternoon, we ought to be ashamed of the time that we have taken to discuss this issue. There's nothing wrong with the law that we've got now. Let's leave it alone. If it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. Because when you try to fix something that's not broke, you do break it. Thank you.
Thank you. Question has been called, and this is an act, so roll call. Yes, you agree with the act as amended.
Janelle Fulbright.
No.
Don Garvin.
Yes.
Chuck Hoskin Jr.
No.
China Glory Jordan.
No.
Chris Stokes.
Yes.
Curtis Snell.
No.
David Thornton.
No.
Kara Cowan Watts.
Yes.
Bill England.
Yes.
Bill John Baker.
No.
Jack Baker.
Yes.
Harley Buzzard.
No.
Julia Coates.
Yes.
Bradley Cobb.
No.
Joe Crittenden.
No.
Jody Fishinghawk.
No.
Meredith Fraley.
No.
Yes, 6 yes and 11 no.
6 yes, 11 no, motion failed. Okay, item 6 is the status of the 911 plan, Ms. Count Watts. And we're infringing on Mr. Baker's time, as he politely told me.
So there's staff here to present on what Chief Smith plans to do to implement this, is what I understand. Sorry, thank you, Madam Speaker.
As you know, the chief pledged to present a plan with regards to better surveying the districts for purposes of apportionment. We have formed a management work group with our primary stakeholders, registration, the tax commission, election commission, geodata center, and information systems, and they have been working on this for several weeks. It's a lot more complex than we thought, like a lot of things. So Todd's going to make the presentation on behalf of the work group.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
No.
First off, I want to apologize for not having this in your packets earlier. We were actually making updates as recent as yesterday afternoon. And so long story short is we are still working on this. Basically, we've broken down the task into 3 phases. The first phase is discovery, finding out what is going on internally with address changes through several different databases and systems and places where we interact with our citizens. And then the other portion of the project deals with the external, dealing with 911, coordinating with the county and city officials that coordinate the 911 data throughout the 14 counties. So the document basically outlines who we're working with, who's been involved in the meetings and discussion, the things that we've looked at. The second page of the document talks about the 3 phases. Again, the 3 phases are the current status. The second phase is citizen addressing development and updates. And then the third phase is ongoing operation and maintenance. There is a map that illustrates the status of 911 by county on the third page, and it's entitled Cherokee Nation 911 Road Centerline Data Collection. And basically you will see there on that legend on the bottom left-hand corner of the map, the dark green represents those counties that have complete and maintained 911 data by the county. The light green indicates that there's pending development. It means that something has already been produced, they may be in QA, and it is set for delivery to the county. The yellow indicates that it's in QA status, meaning that the data is done, but they are QCing the data to ensure it's right, so they're validating the data that's been collected. In progress means that they've just started. In particular, in Muskogee County, you will notice it is in progress, but portions of the northwest corner of that county inside our jurisdiction are in a green status, and that's where the city has already done some data development, but the remainder of the county is awaiting its 911 data development. The red indicates that there is no plan in place, nor is there any roads data. So the two counties that do not have anything in progress at this point in time are Nowata and McIntosh counties. And so, in discussion with several of them, most counties elect to do this through a third-party vendor. There are several third-party vendors that the counties have engaged over the last several years, and that is documented in Attachment A. Attachment A includes all the detailed documentation when they started collecting 911 taxes, if we know that, what status they are in, how are they maintaining it, if there was any relative cost that the county incurred when they developed the data. And so David Justice has been contacting all the county 911 coordinators, and we still have a few that we have been trying to contact for 30 days plus that we have not been able to get a hold of to verify the status of their system, where they are, and what their future plans are. So what we would like to do is continue to work on this and meet the chief's commitment to have this recommendations and some cost estimates of what we're looking at presented to the council by the December timeframe. One other thing I wanted to point out on the fourth page, the Cherokee Nation jurisdiction addresses. It's a pie chart that represents. We basically ran a count on our registration addresses that we provided to you for the redistricting purposes using, I believe it was, is it May 22nd data that we used? Looking at that same May 22nd data that we used for the analysis for redistricting, 42% of our addresses inside registration do not meet our 911 deliverable addresses at this point. So not only do we have to get 911 data in the counties available and coordinate with the county 911 coordinators, but we also need to do some internal cleanup in getting our records prepared inside the Cherokee Nation. So the rest of the document outlines what we're doing. It includes notifications that have gone out into Phoenix for deceased notifications, as well as address changes, and a system that we're calling, for lack of a better term, the last known good address database. And basically it's a collection of our existing data. We pull that together and use the best address from the last point a citizen has contacted us. And so that the rest of the document describes what we're doing, and I will let you guys read that, and would be prepared to speak at the next Rules Committee meeting in November, hopefully with much more progress than what you see here.
That's a lot of progress. Ms. Count-Watts?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's, I guess, 3 comments I have, just because it just came in front of me right now, so I haven't had a long time to look at it. But first of all, it looks like the phone number for those reporting a change of address or a death notice is missing on both of those.
Okay.
So that we can verify. The other thing is, I would hate for somebody to think it's funny to declare me dead, for example, because there seems to be a lack of anything besides me just filling it out and saying somebody's dead or has passed away, right? I mean, there's not much to that form. I mean, granted, I mean, we may be lucky to get that kind of information at all about an individual if they have passed away. Mm-hmm. But there seems to be no, I mean, how are we going to validate what little information you're asking for? Which I am all for doing anything, because this is an issue. Our data is an issue. And the third thing I see we're missing is, I thought during debate and discussion, we had actually asked for a proactive person on a phone tracking down each individual person in parallel with whatever was going on with the 911 geocoding situation in each county. And I just looked over it quickly, but I missed the part where we're actually going to have active resources tracking down using internet and publicly available free data to find folks. Obviously, it's real easy to say, okay, this is where Kara, has her address and stuff. because I'm on council and we all talk to each other, and there's a number of us that would be easy.
Okay.
You asked a bunch of questions, I'm not going to try to answer but one. And as for registration, it's not the intent to use that as the only evidence that somebody has passed on. It's a survey instrument so that somebody has passed on. They can notify the registration department, and we can independently verify through obituaries and so forth. But it would not be used as the only evidence to remove somebody's name from the active registration.
And the only reason, I never have had any issue with how we handle a registration, except I remember the first time I ran, somehow, some way, somebody changed my address. I will never forget getting a new blue card, and it was not me. I never will understand, I guess, maybe how that happened during that process.
Somebody wanted to be you.
I guess. So, all of a sudden, that was interesting. And I just would be leery of not validating that.
Well, one other thing, I'll turn it back to Todd, who's more of an expert on this. Everybody needs to understand that prior to now, and understandably so, we have not required our citizens to physically declare a real location address. Most people, or a lot of people in rural counties, we use the Stillwell post office box. When I used to be in Ardara County a lot, the majority of the people out in the rural areas. So we are going to have to do a mindset change with our citizens and either require or extend that invitation very enthusiastically that we need two addresses. If you have a mail post office box, that's fine. We need a physical address.
Time's up.
Very good, thank you.
Lori Jordan?
Yes, just kind of a follow-up on Kira's comments. I have always been amazed that when my daughter passed on and my mother passed on, it just seemed like in no time their names had been removed from the rolls without any input by family members or any verification that I know of. Yet my mother-in-law's been gone 15 years and she's still on the rolls and on the voting rolls. So I'm kind of wondering how we're going to assure, much like Kara's comments, that someone doesn't erroneously get taken off the rolls, because there doesn't appear to be a standardized method by which we remove people. And it's not that I was against that happening, but I just found that somewhat unusual, because I know that no one in the family had called anybody. Yet, when I decided to run 3.5 years ago, I was doing some checking, and I noted at least 30 people on my list that were deceased. But I also noted, it was very curious, that 2 people that I was very close to had been quickly removed. So I'm thinking we better, when we start doing this, we need to do it extremely careful. We need to make sure we have verifications. And I'm not saying that we need to make it impossible to remove people, but we need to be careful when we do it, or we do run the risk that someone calls up and says, well, Kara's passed away or Tina's passed away, take them off. I would like to be able to vote in the next election, and I would like to be assured that I continue to be a member, but I can see that happening. I can see someone doing that just for kicks. So we need to very carefully move on this removal process.
Yeah. I also wanted to point out a couple things to address a few of the comments and questions. Regarding the personnel and active resources that are calling, one of the things that we've employed immediately is with this last known good address database. We tap into the U.S. Postal Service National Change of Address database. And so as people move and notify the U.S. Postal Service, we verify against that and then subsequently update the addresses. We are only doing that in the last known good address database. At this point, to the comments by Councilor Jordan and Ms. Watts, we are not changing the record inside registration at this point. But that is something that we are evaluating and will come back with a recommendation on how we deal with additional information that we get through a service like the National Change of Address, and they also have a deceased notification through the U.S. Postal Service that we can employ and then update records. So that is, from Active Resources, we are polling those national databases, but it's more in an automated process at this point, in addition to the mail outs that we're
Good,
looking
time's
at.
up.
Very good.
Any other questions for Todd? Thank you for this really good information.
Okay.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing the time on the agenda, Madam Speaker.
Thanks, everybody, for staying within the 3 minutes. I know there's a lot that was discussed, and I appreciate the cooperation. And did we have any announcements? Ms. Lori Jordan, I think you have.
Oh, I do have an announcement. Maybe I'm the only one that likes to see family come together during the holidays, and I know I'm not the only one. I know you guys have all like holidays. We've made arrangements through Mr. Stewart that on the Tuesday of our committee meetings, which will be November 23rd, you all will have your traditional turkey dinner here at the council house after E&F committee. And I'm hoping that the speaker will say that was okay.
So long as it doesn't come out of our budget.
Yeah, and Mr. Stewart has been very kind in assisting us in that endeavor. So folks, we're going to come together as a family, and we're going to eat our turkey dinner on the 23rd. So you all plan to stay after E&F.
If I please stay, because she's been hounding me for 3 months. Mr. England?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Brad and I is having our community meeting this Saturday, and it's in Oklahoma, so.
Any other announcements? Like our next meeting is Tuesday, November 23rd at 9 o'clock. Okay, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No. All opposed? No.